So now vMotion means that we can change a VM from one host to another. We can change it from one data store to another. That's storage vMotion. Or we can actually change it to another host. It's being managed by a completely different vCenter, right? So there are lots of different ways that we can migrate. We've broken down some of those barriers. There are different types of migrations. There's a cold migration. This is where we're going to migrate the VM that's powered off, right? So a powered off virtual machine, we can migrate that over to a new host or to another data store. Suspended. Migrate a suspended virtual machine to a new host or data store. That's where we click the sideways yellow equal sign and we've suspended that VM. We can migrate it to another host. vMotion. vMotion is the migration of an up and running virtual machine from one host to the other while Bob and Mary are accessing it, right? And then we have storage vMotion that Dave was talking about earlier. Storage vMotion, we're going to migrate a powered on virtual machine files to a new data store, from one data store to another. And then we have what we call shared nothing vMotion, where we're migrating a powered on virtual machine to a new host and a new data store simultaneously. All good stuff, right? So here is a great gridded chart for you. Down the left-hand side, the left column, the migration type, cold suspended vMotion, storage vMotion, or shared nothing, right? And then if we go into column 2, it says virtual machine power state. Well, if it's off, or if it's cold, it's off. If it's suspended, it's suspended. Everything else, it's up and running. It's up and running. The VM is up and running. People are accessing it. It's presenting data. It's doing whatever, right? Now, change host or data store. If it's powered off, we could change the host or the data store, or both. If it's suspended, I can change the host or the data store, or both, right? If I'm doing vMotion, that means that I'm just changing the host. vMotion proper is just changing it from one host to the other. Storage vMotion means I'm changing the data store, one data store to another. Shared nothing vMotion says I'm doing both. Now, some of you probably picked up earlier when we were talking about if a VM was powered off or if it was suspended, I emphasized the word or. Right? If you think back to your logic class that you had in high school or college and anding and oring and all that stuff, right? So the top two, we have host or data store, or we can do both. So you choose. The bottom option, shared nothing vMotion, we're going to do both. It's both operations in one single manual operation. Well, Vince, you added manual to that as well. Some of you know that we have DRS that we're going to be talking about Thursday. DRS, our distributed resource scheduler, is a function or a feature, and vMotion is a feature of vSphere, and they're both very good friends. DRS looks at stuff and tells its buddy vMotion to migrate it, to move it. Okay? Shared nothing is not part of any DRS algorithm. It doesn't do anything, right? We use vMotion to do that. So shared nothing vMotion is both. Not an or, not an and, it's a both, right? So let's talk about shared nothing vMotion. What is this? Some of you may have heard the term enhanced vMotion. Not to be confused with enhanced vMotion compatibility, but you may have heard the term enhanced vMotion. You may have heard the term cross-host vMotion. And now we have the term shared nothing, which is what it's called proper. Okay? So let's go back and talk about enhanced vMotion. There was never such a thing. It was a marketing term. And here's what's interesting about that, is it made it into some of the slide decks back 5.1, 5.5, somewhere around that time, and it said enhanced vMotion. And a friend of mine was on Palo Alto's campus and was meeting with the team, getting ready to do something, right? I don't know what, but anyway, and he went up to one of the engineers and he goes, "Hey, I have a question about enhanced vMotion." And he said, "What?" And he said, enhanced vMotion. And he goes, there is no such thing as enhanced vMotion. And he said, well, this is this. He goes, well, you mean cross-host vMotion. He said, well, and he showed him the education deck, the PowerPoint presentation. He goes, that's marketing. So there never really was, marketing came up with this, and that was never really a phrase. For a while, it was called cross-host vMotion. Okay. When we've gotten into the 6.x version of this product, shared nothing vMotion can mean a lot of different things. We can change vCenters, we can change networks, we can change all of this stuff with this, right? But that is a manual operation, right? So it's called shared nothing vMotion, and it means exactly what it is. We don't have to have anything shared to do that. Across vCenter servers, so meaning this VM that's running on this host is being managed by this vCenter is going to migrate to another host and another vCenter that's managing it. So everything we can do that with the exception of storage vMotion. Shared data stored required, meaning that both the source and the destination must see the same data stored in order to do this. The only thing that is required to that we have shared storage is vMotion proper. Okay, vMotion proper, we have to have shared storage. And then, as many of you pointed out, if you'll remember back to the LA data center, in the LA data center we had an AMD and an Intel, and you said we can't migrate between the two, and that's 100% true. When we look at CPU compatibility, if the VM is powered off, we can go from an AMD to an Intel. We don't care. Okay, it's not up and running. If we're dealing with storage vMotion, we don't care because we're not going to a new host. We're just moving files. Okay, everything else, the VM or the host, the source and the destination host must be from the same manufacturer, either AMD or Intel, and they must be from the same family. I cannot go from an Intel Nehalem to an Intel Pentium. Cannot do it. Okay, so they have to be from the same manufacturer and the same family. Now, vMotion migration moves a powered-on VM from one host to the other. Why do we even do this? Well, it improves overall hardware usage. So we may get a group of VMs that power on, and all of a sudden we've got 3 or 4 hosts in our environment, and this one's running hot because we've got a lot of VMs on here. And the resources are available, but they're over there. We can vMotion them over to free up resources on this so everybody is equal. And it talks about down here at the bottom, DRS for balancing virtual machines across the host. DRS is a feature we'll talk about Thursday. vMotion is a separate feature, and they are very good friends. DRS keeps track of what's going on, and it says, hey, migrate this over there. vMotion then does that. And then continuous virtual machine operation while accommodating scheduled hardware maintenance. I've got a host that's got a bad power supply. Now, it still has an active one, but I need to replace the defective one. Well, in the past, how did I have to fix that? Power down the system. Bring down the application. Bring down the operating system. Shut it off. Now I can take the workloads, the VMs that people are accessing, migrate them off, power the host down, change power supplies, bring it back up, migrate the VMs back. So for continuous operation, that's another reason. Right? Now, this is cool. Let me get out of the way. Watch this. Watch this. This is cool. Right? We're going to start the source ESXi host. We're going to fly that VM over, and then watch this. We're going to send these green balls across the bottom of the screen here in just a second. This is cool. Right? Look at that. I love it. That's perfect. It's animation at its finest. So I'll let you see that again, right? So watch it if you missed it this time, right? So this is what happens with vMotion. We're going to take the VM and fly it, and it goes across the top of your racks like that. Just saying. And then we send these green balls across. I think that's cool, right? All right, so actually, let's talk about what vMotion does. Okay, vMotion migrates an up and running virtual machine while people are accessing it from one host to the other. So let's strip away the covers and look inside and figure out what's going on. All right, so in this diagram, this is Bob. Bob is accessing VMA that's running on ESXi01. Okay? And for whatever reason, we decide we want to migrate it over to ESXi02. So I right-click on that VM and say migrate, and I say I want to put it over on ESXi02. What ends up happening? The very first thing that happens is on the destination host, in this case ESXi02, we create what I call a skeleton VM. It's like a placeholder. And this placeholder VM is an up and running VM. Okay? It's consuming CPU. It's consuming memory resources. But nobody's accessing it. It's just up. It's like a catcher's mitt. It's sitting there. It's ready, but nothing's happening yet. It's there. It's a skeleton VM. Okay? So we create that on the destination host. In the meantime, we create a memory bitmap. I like to call it a bit bucket. Any changes that Bob makes to the memory of that VM while we're migrating it is collected in that memory bitmap. Okay? Any changes. Then, while we've got this bit bucket out there, we start copying the memory from one host to the other. Once we get that memory over, we take the changes in the memory bitmap, slam that across our vMotion network, change some network pointers, and now Bob is accessing VMA on ESXi02, and we clean up after ourselves. So my question to all of you is, in this migration, what did we move? What did we move in this scenario? What did we move? Dave, did you have Red Bull this morning? Blake, what file did we move? And I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just trying to get more information. What file? Too many, actually. Good for you. Do you drink Red Bull? Or do you drink one of those other brands? Red Bull. See, Dave. I knew I liked you. I knew I liked you. That's what I do. Those monsters, those are okay, right? The worst is the Mountain Dew one. I can't do that one, right? I can feel my hair growing. My heart starts going. Anyway, Red Bull. Buy it by the case. That's what I do. Amazon sells it. Anyway. So, Blake says the config file. Dave says Red Bull. We moved one Red Bull from this to this. So, I got memory, I got files. What did we move? The rest of you are kind of did the Red Bull conversation. What did we move when we migrated this? What did we move? I got a couple votes for memory. I got some vote for files. What did we move? There you go. Cue me in's. Nephew works for Red Bull. There you go. You need to send us some samples. I'm just kidding. I buy enough Red Bull that I probably own stock in it. Anyway. Right? Dave says hopefully he gets discounts. All right, let's back up. And a lot of you got quiet, and that's because it's kind of confusing. Right? What actually happens. And here's what's interesting about this. Here's what's interesting about this whole process. This is happening in your data center right now. It's happened already this morning. It'll happen this afternoon. We take this for granted. Okay, we take this for granted because it just happens. Yet, if I ask how this actually happens and what we actually do, very few people actually understand what it's actually doing. Right? But it happens. And here's the thing. When I first saw vMotion, it was at a conference. And the product manager comes out, and there's huge television screens, right? and he's got an engineer with him, and they show the display of the VM running on host 1, and they show the other hosts, and what they said is they were going to bring up the console of the VM that they were going to migrate with vMotion, and they were going to play a YouTube video, not a YouTube video. They go to Apple conferences, not the VMware conferences. But anyway, so they're going to migrate. They're going to show this YouTube video and migrate it from one host to the other. And I thought, well, that's just going to be a mess, because it's going to start buffering, and you're going to see that wheel, and maybe it'll crash, whatever. So they bring up the VM console. They start streaming this YouTube video, and all of a sudden, it migrates from one host to the other, and the video never buffered. And I literally was amazed, right? I'm like, man, I'm a trained IT professional. I know you can't do that. Yet they just did it. I was amazed, right? Wow, that was cool. Yet we take it for granted. It's happened in your data center today, and it's probably happening now, and it's going to happen this afternoon. You're going to migrate these VMs. And it's very, very cool, and it's very, very efficient. Okay? Now, let's go back and talk about what we actually do. We right-click the VM. We do create the skeleton VM, and that VM process is up and running. Okay? Now, what do we move? Do we move? So let's talk about where the virtual machine files are. That's where the disk is, the VMX file, the NVRAM file, all of that. Those are right there. We're not going to move those. Both hosts, the source and the destination, see it. We're not going to move any files. Right? So what are we going to do? We're going to create this memory bitmap. Right? That's where we're collecting all the changes to the memory space while Bob is accessing it. Right? In the meantime, we're going to copy the active memory space for virtual machine A that resides on ESXi01. We're going to copy that. We're actually going to move it from host 1 over to host 2. Once we've copied all that memory, we're then going to take those last bits of changes that Bob has been making that we've collected in that memory bitmap. We do slam those across our vMotion network and change some network pointers. So what did we move? We moved the active memory space of that virtual machine A from host 1 over to host 2. That's all we moved. Right? No files moved. Some people say that the processor moves. We didn't move the processor. We moved where we're processing, but we didn't move the processor. We just moved the memory space and some pointers. That's it. We didn't move the pointers. We just changed the pointers. Right? All we did is move the active memory from host 1 over to host 2. Change some pointers. That's what vMotion does. And it's very, very, very efficient. Right? Now, I don't recall in this lab if they actually have you bring up a command line. But what you can do this. No, don't do this in your production environment. Do it in lab. Bring open a command prompt in the VM that you're vMotioning and do a ping -T to the default gateway or something. So it's going to ping and ping and ping and ping and ping, and you watch how many packets get dropped. If you drop a packet, I would be surprised. You might see the latency go up just a little bit, but I doubt if you'll see a packet dropped doing this. Now, here's my next question. How long does this take? How long does vMotion take? And Matthew, I may need your help in this. Is anybody else having any issues with the video? So Jonathan says depends upon the size of the memory used. Okay, so no issues. Okay. Right. Everything looks good on my end. That's not to say that it won't blow up later. But anyway, so my question is, how quickly does this vMotion migration take? And Jonathan says it depends. Thank you. It is. It's going to vary based upon how much active memory we have to move. If I have a VM that has 384 meg of memory, remember that? Meg of memory, I could probably migrate that across my vMotion network rather quickly. If I have a VM that has 2 terabytes of memory assigned to it, it's going to take longer to get that 2 terabytes across this. Also, what kind of network do I have? Right? We said that proven practices say that we put everything on its own separate network, right? But what happens if my vMotion network is has other network connections on it, right? Other connection types. So it is going to vary, but usually it is very quick, right? Less than a minute. What's interesting about this is a friend of mine was doing some vMotioning in a lab environment for a class, and all of a sudden, or for the class as part of the curriculum, he was vMotioning them over, and it was over a slow landline or a slow connection, and it ran. He sent them to lunch, and he thought, well, it's going to air out. Came back from lunch, and it had completed, but it took a long time, but it still got done. So it is very cool, right?